Today, my guest is Vivian Balakrishnan, who is Singapore's Foreign Minister and a good friend to Australia over a long period of time. Vivian, welcome to the show and thank you very much for being with us.
Oh, thank you. Always great to see you. Blast from the past.
Thank you.
We've been up to a lot together.
That is definitely true, and I'm sorry we can't be together in person, but you know, it won't be too long before we can be again.
Hope so. Hope so.
Yeah. Vivian, the relationship between Australia and China is clearly strained at the moment, economically and politically. Does it surprise you that the relationship has taken this turn?
Well, first I would say, I'm not really in a position to advise Australia. But what I would say is share perhaps a perspective from Singapore, this tiny city-state in the heart of Southeast Asia. The biggest success story of the last 40 years really has been China after the reform started by Deng Xiaoping. And the result of that, and especially the last 20 years since they joined the WTO, China has become our largest trading partner. But the other surprising factoid perhaps may be that Singapore is also the largest foreign investor in China, has been since 2013. So the point is that from a Singapore perspective, we've got skin in the game. And our attitude to China has been to demonstrate relevance. So for instance, we've got three government-to-government projects. The first one was in Suzhou. It's an industrial park, bring in foreign companies, build manufacturing plants. Second was in Tianjin. That was an eco-city when this whole thing of sustainable development came about. And our most recent project was in Chongqing. In a sense, part of the BRI, but really an attempt to connect Western China. And through this new corridor, which we call the Chongqing Connectivity Initiative, International Land Sea Trade Corridor. Sorry, it sounds better in Chinese. But this corridor links Western China through into Southeast Asia via Singapore. So it's been about relevance, being about being useful, but not being made use of. So now this is a delicate balance which all of us need to find, and we've been able to find that. And I would say right now, if you were to ask me, I would have to say our relations are excellent. And perhaps a lesser known fact is that even during this COVID pandemic, at critical moments, quietly, both sides have helped each other at critical points in time. So there is a relationship not based on symmetry, you can't, because we are so small. It's not based on complete congruence, it's not possible, but we find ways to work together. And where there are differences, we work through them. So the point is that you have to treat the issues as they come up, the differences, as part and parcel of a longer term relationship that has to be managed. And, it's like a game in which the same players are going to be at the table week after week. And even if you have differences, work it out and understand that there's a much larger account and a much longer term horizon. So that's just my take from Singapore. I mean, I'm in no position to tell Australia how to conduct foreign policy. And
no,
Julie
and I
Bishop
wouldn't
and
expect
Marie
you
Spain
to.
are more than capable of doing this.
Yes, indeed. And my former housemate in Canberra for 20 years, Maurice Payne, would not be appreciative at all of you giving her advice about how to manage the China relationship, despite the fact that she likes you very much. No, and I know how well you get along.
Perfectly.
Indeed. Well, I've been in some of those meetings of ministers for trade, defence and foreign affairs, and I know how close you and Maurice are. So it's a great relationship that we've got.
Yes. Chris, you've been there, you've seen it up close.
I have, and enjoyed it too. The approach that you've just outlined that Singapore is taking with China, that's generally the approach of the ASEAN nations, that they all see similarly that they can have a relationship with China which doesn't have to exclude others?
Well, I would characterize the relationship with ASEAN and China along the following dimensions. First, China is now the largest trading partner for virtually all of us. But a more recent development, which may not be fully appreciated yet, is that if you ask China who their largest trading partner is, in fact, ASEAN has now overtaken the EU and the US. So this trade interdependence is real and it's growing. So that's the first point, right? The next point is that even if you look in terms of China's Belt and Road Signature project, the key interest of Southeast Asia is investments, and particularly investments in infrastructure, in connectivity. And so there again, you see that there is an obvious confluence of interests, medium and long-term interests. Are there problems or differences? You know fully well that there are. But again, for instance, in the South China Sea, where there are differences over claims, for each of the Southeast Asian countries with claims, and I would exclude Singapore because we have no claims in the South China Sea, but for each of the claimant states, their differences, their disputes, even if you want to call it that, with China are just one dimension of a much broader relationship, and therefore would be looked at strategically. And no one wants it to get out of hand or to disrupt the long-term trajectory of relationships. Now, one final point I would make about ASEAN is that ASEAN is very, in fact, insistent on maintaining an inclusive and open regional architecture. And this is something which Australia would be familiar with, because, I mean, you know that we've always been advocates, champions for Australia's economic and political engagement with our part of the world. And it's same thing applies to China. So even as China is our biggest trading partner, even as China is a significant source of investment, and we are key investors into China, we want to keep our region open, inclusive, and that, of course, relates to the other elephant in the room, America, which has, in fact, more invested in Southeast Asia than America has invested in India, China, and Korea combined. That's another factoid which is not fully appreciated.
Here in Australia, the media commentary is very much that the only issue that people talk about is the tension between China and the rest of the nations of the Indo-Pacific. And the South China Sea is, as you know, often used as the primary example of tension. But what you're saying, if I can paraphrase, is that countries like the Philippines, Vietnam, Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, others that have claims over the South China Sea, see that as just one part of a multifaceted relationship with what is clearly the largest economy in the region and 1.3 billion people who aren't suddenly going to go away. So managing that relationship and that South China Sea tension is just another thing to discuss as opposed to becoming the most important part of the relationship.
Yes. So it's viewing, it's a long-term game. You're not dealing with an adversary. You don't want to make them adversary. But it is a stakeholder, and you will have differences, and there will be divergence. The question is, can you resolve it? And even if you can't now, frankly, territorial claims are very difficult to resolve. It may take years, decades even, and no country is going to walk away from claims, lightly. But it does not have to be an absolute block to ongoing engagement and building up those relationships. So that's really what's happening in Southeast Asia.
Do you think that there is a party, and you can't also comment on foreign policy out of Beijing, but would it surprise you if there wasn't a group in Beijing formulating now a dignified exit for both Australia and China out of the current imbroglio that we find ourselves in?
China thinks long-term and takes a wide view in geostrategy. And I'm sure there would be a paper somewhere in a drawer on what happens when we press the green button and say, the sun is out and it's good day, mate. When that'll happen, I don't know.
No.
But I hope it happens soon.